Hey knitters, today is not Friday, it is in fact Tuesday, and I'm going to teach you how to read a yarn label. I was going to teach you guys how to do something like complicated in crochet that maybe not everyone knows how to do, but I just decided that maybe we should just start with the basics. Before you can even start crocheting or knitting, you have to pick the right yarn, because the right yarn and the right needle can make all the difference in your project in the end. Stitches in crochet are already bulky, so you pick a too bulky yarn and your project just ends up being ridiculous. And I found this true in knitting because knitting stitches are just very compact, a lot more than crochet, and if the yarn is too big for the needles or too big for the project, then you can have a very rough piece of material that would not really be desirable for much. So I have here a label from Vanish Toys. I don't know how much you can see, but it has a picture of a yarn and it says 4 and medium, which is 4 is generally what's called worsted weight, and I mean in my mind that's like regular yarn is worsted weight. Thread heart's also 4. All yarns will have this right here. And you'll see they're little squares, and one has knitting needles pictured in it, and one has a crocheting needle, and it says on top needle size that you should use this with this yarn. Needle sizes on yarn labels are not necessarily what you should use. It's suggested, but again, you have to see what you're using with the project, see what the project recommends, and also just use your own judgment. If you're really not sure, try out a little bit with one needle, and if you think you have to go bigger or smaller, you got to use your own judgment. These aren't like the Bible. You don't have to follow this to a T. But it tells you that if you would knit with 5mm needles with this yarn, it says 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters or 4 inches by 4 inches, you would get 17 stitches and then 23 rows in 4 inches. That's called a gauge, and it depends on how tight you knit or crochet or how loose you knit or crochet. This is just what they have found to be regular, but it is good for judging in a pattern if you're way too lazy to make a gauge swatch, which is when you you make a 4-inch swatch and then measure how many stitches and rows and whatever. Normally the pattern tells you what the gauge should be, but I generally like to go by this just because I'm lazy and I don't normally make gauge swatches. This is all washing instructions. I don't actually understand washing instructions, so I'm a bit useless right here. I just know if something's acrylic, I'm a lot more likely to wash it. Though just because something's acrylic doesn't mean it's washable. Because I have washed things and they didn't get ruined. It was not so pretty afterwards. And sometimes it gets better. It depends. I know Red Heart, I think, actually gets a little softer after a couple washes. But Caron Simply Soft actually gets really fuzzy after you wash it, even though it is possible to wash it because it is acrylic yarn. See over here I have Lion Brand wool, and it has specific underneath the pictures it actually says hand washed, lay flat to dry, and those you should listen to, especially if it's wool, because as Jenny just found out, because Jenny just did felting, that if you take wool and you put it in hot water and you agitate it, then it will shrink. Generally on a thing it'll say what is in the yarn. It'll say 100% acrylic, it'll 50% wool. I have over here, this is cotton, and this actually I just brought this down as an example because I bought this in Israel, and this is just to prove that pretty much wherever you buy a yarn that has a label, you will be able to find things you need to know about it. So look, it's made in Israel, but I can still see over here, cotton 100%, it says how much is in the yarn. The only thing is not all labels have all the information you need. For example, this, although it says over here, 3 to 3.5 inch knitting needles, here it doesn't say the gauge or anything like that. So if you were really going to be smart, you would knit a gauge swatch to check what the gauge would be for your pattern. I'm making socks out of this, and I did not do a gauge swatch, and I'm pretty sure the socks are going to be too small on me. So it shows you shouldn't be lazy. This, though, has a very important part. Right here, it tells you the color number and then the lot number. The color number is just that it's purple. The lot number is what batch of yarn it was made with. So if you wanted that your socks to not be a shade off, you wanted them to be the same color, you would get them in the same lot. And a lot of people say, oh, lots don't matter. Lots really do matter. When you see it in the finished project, you can see when a color is a little bit off. So if you buy yarn and you know it's going to be, or you suspect it's going to be for one big project, you should try to get them all on the same lot. Over here it says the weight, 7 ounces. Now, in a pattern, it'll normally tell you how much yarn you need, and a lot of times it'll tell you the yardage. Now the if you're using the same weight yarn in the pattern, the yardage is right. But if you're, if you're making it with smaller yarn that you're going to like adjust the gauge to or something like that, then the yardage is not right. That you're going to need more yardage with the smaller yarn and less yardage with the larger yarn. I mean, this is 8 ounces and it's 465. No, I'm making a video. Who's calling? Alright, I don't know who that was. What was I talking about? Something about yardage. Whatever. I did lose track of what I was saying. I actually do not remember anymore. If you don't think I've done such a good job of explaining how to read a yarn label, you should take out Debbie Stoller's book called Stitch and Bitch. I believe it's in both the knitting and the crocheting one that they have a picture of a yarn label, and it describes what each thing on the yarn label means, and it describes it a lot better than I do. Really, what can make a project is not the actual crocheting or knitting itself. It's really the preparation and how much time you put into thinking about the project, and since I don't put a lot of time into thinking about my projects, that's why a lot of mine kind of fail. If you're on Ravelry, which you all should be because Ravelry is pretty much an awesome site, you can go, if you can find the project on that site, go see what yarn other people use. But also, just because someone used that yarn in their project does not mean it's the best yarn. It just, you can look at, and sometimes I'll project notes saying, oh, this yarn is really bad, don't use it, or this didn't really work out so well, or this worked out great, and it's a great substitute yarn, because most of the time I don't use the yarn suggested in the pattern. A lot of times the yarn suggested in the pattern is rather expensive, so I get the cheaper stuff. And it's good to go to Ravelry and just see if that yarn was used before. And people in Ravelry are really friendly. You send them a message saying, hey, I saw you did this project, do you think you could help me out? They'll be willing to help you. You can go to the boards and ask for help. It's awesome. I love Ravelry. So that is all I have to say today. This was a rather instructive video and a little bit different from how we normally do it on this channel, but I don't know, I felt the need to talk about yarn labels, and I could talk about yarn all day, but I'm not going to. This video is probably really long. So I love you guys, and hope you enjoyed this, and have a good day. Bye!